Teachers of Reddit, what is the smartest / most creative way of cheating that you've ever seen? I'm a high school teacher, but the story is about my own high school math teacher playing us and cheating. It was an honors algebra / geometry class, and it was well known that Mr. D reused the same questions every year just to change the numbers. He made a big deal about making sure we all gave our exam papers back to him after we looked at our scores and gone over everything together to prevent cheating for the next year. Well, of course, some of my classmates got their hands on a complete set of tests from the previous year. Soon, everyone had a set. Before each exam, we would sit together and make sure we knew how to solve every problem on the test so we could do it on the real exam with different numbers. Years later, when I became a teacher myself, I saw Mr. D at a funeral. I confessed to him this is what we used to do, and he smirked. He said, "Who do you think leaked the test packet to get you to study?" Mr. D had figured out kids won't study if the teacher suggests it, but if they think they're getting away with something, they totally will. So he managed to get a test packet out and circulating as contraband. Blew my mind. We're only one post in. First post, and I'm already like, this is the smartest thing I've ever heard. This teacher knew how to get kids to work. It's true. If they feel like they're cheating, they're gonna do it all the more. Impressive work, Mr. D. Impressive work. Story 2. Not the student, but the teacher. So the teacher, let's call him Mr. A, had a reputation for being a phenomenal teacher who had every student engaged and invested in his class, no matter how mundane the subject. Anytime he asked a question, every student's hand would shoot in the air with them shouting things like, "Call on me," or "I know the answer." Simply, Mr. A developed a reputation in the district as one of its best teachers. Fast forward a couple of years and I'm grabbing coffee with Mr. A and I ask him, "What's your trick? How do you get every student bought in?" His response? "Well, I told the kids every time we had a visitor in class, I need you all to raise your hand like I was going to give away free candy. But if you don't know the answer, raise your left hand. If you do know it, raise your right hand so I know who to call on and we all look good." Worked like a charm. Story 3. I was a TA for anatomy and physiology. The professor would ask me to sit in on finals to prevent cheating. One kid came in with a vitamin water. No worries. Halfway through the test, the professor noticed that they kept turning the bottle and squinting. This goes on for another 20 minutes. Professor goes up, grabs the vitamin water bottle, and rips off the label. It had a cheat sheet written on the back. The students had gone to the effort to make a fake vitamin water bottle label and write notes on the back. The professor was impressed by the creativity and decided to give the student a 0 and not report them to the academic committee. Story 4. As a student, I remember when my entire year level was accused of cheating, as the test results came back consistently high. What the teachers failed to realize was that some of the answers were actually hidden in other questions. So if you got stuck on one question, you could find the answer later on in another. An example would be, this was a Japanese language test, by the way. What does blank word mean? And later on a question would use that word in context, so you would understand what that word meant. Story 5. In high school, I was in a computer-based learning program, and our science tests were taken digitally. However, they used a program where once you entered the test, your entire screen was locked into it, and the only way to exit was to click the finish button on the test or turn off the computer, which effectively did the same thing. Another feature of the program was that once you were in the test, anything you had in your clipboard, copied text, was not able to be pasted into the answers section on the test, preventing the only other way to cheat. However, after creating my own classroom at home and making fake tests and playing with the program to figure things out, I realized it would allow you to copy things from inside the test and paste them elsewhere in the test. The developers of the program also did not take into account the sign-in screen, where you have to find the test and enter it. Long story short, I would copy my entire page of notes I'd taken on the test material, paste it into the section where I would enter my login info, then recopy it, enter the test and paste it in one of the answers, using it to answer every question and deleting it before clicking finish. This, absolutely I forget to delete it. I just leave it there, the full cheat sheet on one of the answers, and just completely expose myself. Story 6. So, not a teacher, but I witnessed probably the biggest cheating-related scandal in our high school's history. For context, we had the sweetest old guy as our chem teacher. He called everyone bud or buddy or ma'am. He always helped. He volunteered to teach driver's ed after school so kids could learn to drive. He always had a twinkle in his eye because he genuinely showed love and kindness to everyone. A side effect of this was that he was very trusting. So one day before finals, he ran to the bathroom during class while everyone was wrapping up their lab reports. While he was gone, someone ran to his desk, found the finals just sitting there, snapped a pic, and then ran back to their desk before he got back. Somehow, no one tattled. Probably because like 90% of our grade was on board with it. The pictures got texted around, but a few people were smart enough to Bluetooth it to each other so it wouldn't be tracked. Well, after the test, everyone had high scores and apparently someone confessed. This resulted in a huge investigation by the assistant principals, school police officer, and faculty. They traced every text message and busted so many people, all except the ones who transferred via Bluetooth. They had to reissue the test. Man, that was crazy. I felt so bad for the teacher. He was really sad someone had taken advantage of him, and I was too. He was such a good dude. To clarify, the school didn't trace the messages. They just had 1v1 interviews with the school cop nearby, so kids would feel pressured to snitch. Apparently a few cracked under the pressure, but if I recall correctly, a fair number got away with it. Story 7. I passed a pop quiz in high school by looking across the room and focusing on the top of the smart girl's pencil and trying to decipher if she wrote A, B, C, or D after the teacher asked each question. It actually turned out more successful than I thought it would. Also, I'm all about academic integrity when it comes to important higher education when relative to your field of work, but I don't understand loading immense amounts of needless information into young hormonal teenagers and getting upset or surprised that they don't have the mental stamina to deal with it all and would rather cheat. Yeah, not saying I know a better way to do it, but there are clear issues with, mandatory education, if that makes sense. Just like everyone has to learn this wide breadth of things. And it makes sense, give everyone a taste of little everything so they know what they want to specialize in, sure. But it does just lead to a lot of people being like, I don't want to be here, I don't want to take this, I would rather just cheat and get it over with. Because they're not going to use it in their life at all. In university, though, do better, guys. Story 8. I was supervising a final chemistry exam along with another coworker. Not 15 minutes in, a hand slams down on a desk, and I turn around expecting the worst, only to see my coworker angrily shouting at a pair of really frightened 10th graders whose desk he smashed. Amidst the shouting, I caught the words, Morse code. The guy proceeded to take them to the office. I called a hallway supervisor to take over and ran after the group. Apparently, the kids were silently tapping the answers amongst themselves in Morse code. Not even with their fingernails, just their fingertips. I never heard a thing. My coworker happened to catch B in Morse code or something. I honestly thought he finally went crazy, solely because of his appearance. Picture Robin Williams in Jumanji going, "What year is it?" I'm 100% sure that if this coworker weren't in the room, they would have gotten away with it for sure. I almost feel bad for them. You know, like, what are the odds that someone who is adjudicating your exam is going to know Morse code? Now, the odds are never zero, clearly, but I can't imagine they're that high either. Unlucky, guys. Nice try. Story 9. I can name the worst, and I've definitely shared it before, but it wasn't my student. It was a friend's. She downloaded a worksheet for the kids to do while she was in a meeting of some sort. Kids found the worksheet's answer sheet online and proceeded to copy the answers. Last answer said, student responses will vary, and that's what one kid wrote for the answer. Other times you'll see one kid misspell something or gets an answer wrong, and everyone who copied from him has the same error. Story 10. Not sure if this would work anymore, but if I had a paper to write on a book I didn't read, I would find a well-written paper online. Then translate the entire thing from English to German, German to French, French to Spanish, then Spanish back to English. Pull the original paper and the new one up side by side and clean up the grammar on the new paper, and you've got the same concept but written just different enough to not be plagiarism. Worked like a charm. Story 11. So as a teacher, the smartest way I cheat is by giving the kids a note card and telling them they can put whatever cheat sheet stuff they want on there. It tricks them into actually studying for their math tests. Also a pro tip from a math teacher, most students don't know how to study for math, and that's why they struggle. Think of studying math like practicing an instrument. You need to learn a piece by practicing multiple problems from a certain skill set. If you aren't practicing at least 8 to 18 problems at least every day to 2 days, then you're never going to get past the little mistakes and missteps which probably plague you. Story 12. During an AP US history test in high school, we had a question asking about the author of a book. Kid raises his hand and says, Mrs. Blank, I read the book this weekend and I really liked it. The teacher, obviously forgetting she had put this question on the test, replies with, Oh, by author's name. I love that book. The whole class bursts out laughing, but no one says anything, because she had just given us the answer to the question. Story 13. Not a teacher, but here are the methods I used back in the day. I wrote formulas on those pens that had roll-out calendars. Almost got caught when I accidentally lost my grip and the calendar rolled back in the pen in such a loud way that my classmates looked at me. I also wrote formulas on my clothes and body, the hem of my shirt, and the part of my legs that gets covered by a sock. I put a couple of chapters on the notebook app on the old BlackBerry. I did this by hand, which involved me copying straight from the book to my phone. Put answers and the song lyrics in my iPod, but I didn't do this frequently. I forgot why. It was either because my school had cracked down on technology, phones, iPods, laptops, or I just had a hard time scrolling with the click wheel. We would straight up swap papers too. I think I only did it during trig because exams we were arranged alphabetically and I was seated next to this dude who was really good at math. I was afraid of doing this, but the fact that we were so close to each other made it less scary, so I did it. The only time I got caught was when this new teacher noticed that I kept taking out my handkerchief, which had a 1 by 1 inch piece of paper that had some formulas. In hindsight, if I pulled a bit of sleight of hand, I would have never been caught. The funny thing is, the year before, I cheated on a test with 2 letter-sized papers. Okay, when it comes to cheating, OP is a veteran. Why have you cheated so much in so many different ways? Once again, I'm kind of impressed. That's a lot of dedication to being lazy, I guess. I don't know if lazy is the right term, but I mean like not studying, I guess. And also, I'm sorry, you copied chapters into your BlackBerry? That must have taken forever, OP. Surely you could have just studied instead. Story 14. I haven't tried this method yet, and I don't think anyone did, but there's a certain level of hertz and sound that only people below a certain age can hear. There are also devices that play that kind of sound, so if the teacher is old, she/he won't hear it. Using that, the students can communicate with Morse code and such. I thought about this, and it's not very practical or useful, but it's very creative, so I thought I would share my idea. Now, this would go great until you get that one teacher who has really good hearing for their age. Then it all comes crumbling down. The whole hearing spectrum thing is too subjective that I don't even think it's worth it. I foresee too many problems. Story 15. I had a class in the AM with a kid who was a TA for my physics class the afternoon before. Weird period system at my old school. He would tell me the answers to tests he had graded the day before, and I would write them in black ink on the side of the sole of my black boots. I would then sit with my leg bent with my foot on my knee and read the answers during the test. You couldn't see them unless the light hit the ink just right. After the test, I would lick my finger and smudge the answers out. Story 16. I remember a story from my OChem professor. This student all semester who wasn't showing up to class kept getting his score improved significantly after regrades. They got their tests back, had a day to review them, and were allowed to resubmit for a regrade. They knew he was cheating because of the unlikelihood of the grading mistakes on multiple exams, but the TAs who graded it couldn't confidently say it wasn't their handwriting. Ultimately, it was an office worker for the department who figured it out near the end of the semester. His staples were angled differently than the exams handed out that were mass stapled. He was recreating the test, printing it, re-answering it, and then grading it in the same pen as the TAs, and had done a good job copying the writing style. Story 17. In my high school, we had a Facebook group chat with all or almost all students from the same year. So if 2 classes had the same teacher, we would get the same tests, but we would always have the exam on the same day. So, for example, during the exam, someone from my class would take a picture of the exam, post it in the group chat, and somebody from the other class that wasn't having the exam at the moment would send the answers back in the group chat. So everyone almost in the class would be on their phones and see the answers from the group chat. Later, the class that was giving us the answers would have the exam having all the answers already, because as I said, they would get the same exam as we did, usually used for maths, chemistry, and physics. What year did you have to go to school to have your teachers let you use your phones in class? Because when it came to like social media and smartphones, I was in school when that was sort of just starting, maybe a little after, but every class was like taking a test, phone goes at the front in a basket. No way we were allowed to have those on us. For reference, I graduated in 2016, high school. Story 18. A teacher told me there was a smart kid and a stupid kid who both missed the test. So the brother, this was an old Irish Christian brothers school, made them take the test and sit on opposite sides of the room, and he constantly walked between them to make sure they weren't cheating. When both got a good score, he was puzzled, and eventually asked the smart kid what he did. Turns out he clipped some of the answers onto a little part of the brother's robes, and the other kid took it off as the brother passed. The dumbest one I had ever heard was when one student put, "I don't know" as an answer, and another one said, "Me neither." Story 19. Not a teacher, but definitely accused by one of cheating, though I wasn't. High school English class. We were reading 4 books in this 2-month period, and then we would have a test on all 4. We'd finished reading the first 3 and were about to start on the last one when I got sick. It was about 2 weeks. Came back just in time for the test. Multiple choice test, choices A to D. Questions were from each of the books, with each letter answer from one of the 4 books. It was fairly easy to figure out the answers from the book I hadn't read by eliminating the answers from the books I had. Was accused of cheating, but teacher couldn't prove it. We only read the books in class, and I was gone while reading the last book. She never figured out how I answered the questions correctly about the book I never read. So the teacher didn't think even for a moment that you just read it on your own, because that would be my first assumption. But yeah, OP, the way that you did it makes a lot of sense too. And also does kind of just seem like a flaw with the way the test was created, but hey, that's not your problem. Story 20. Once a friend cut open an eraser and placed notes inside of it. Then he put a latching mechanism where you'd have to push the top away from the bottom and then squeeze. What would happen is the two latches would get loose when you put the top and bottom apart, and the squeeze would be the opening. Since he was a good friend, he'd share his eraser with me because I lost mine. Someone had snaked and we got called down. The principal couldn't figure out how we'd open it, and we got off scot-free. Story 21. Not me, but my friend pulled this off. Both of us are college students. Before our discussions, the TA would take attendance online. My friend's TA always forgot his laptop, so he would ask students if he could use theirs to start the attendance code. My friend got a keylogger, let the TA use his laptop, and got his account login. The TA had access to all the quiz answers, and they were posted right before the quiz. In the end, he didn't bother using them because the quizzes weren't that hard. Story 22. In some test in university, we had the questions projected on the white table/wall. So the whole class had the same test, and we had multiple choices, A, B, C, D, or E. So with the whole year, we agreed that for each of these letters, we should pair a sign of holding the pen. If it's A, point your pen forward. B, point it to the right. C, to the back. D, to the left. And E, up. And if you don't know the answer, just put down your pen. So we just had to carefully look around for a moment and see what most pens are pointing at, and we would know the answer right away. In my opinion, it's the safest cheating because there's no evidence. And no teacher will notice if you made a careful peek for half a second. Am I crazy? I feel like this would be so easy to see as a teacher. All of a sudden, everyone's pens are doing synchronized swimming. Yeah, I'm not buying it. And also, I've seen Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I know that the popular answer isn't always the right one. Story 23. Obligatory, not a teacher, but a student. This is for a multiple choice exam. For context, we have uniforms and wear black leather shoes. Toe taps indicate the answer. 1 tap for A, 2 taps for B. And if asking, increments the question number by 1. Heel taps increment the question number by a previously agreed number, usually 5 or 10. Toe slash to indicate you are asking, or when broadcasting, means stopping the question number count to indicate the answer, or you lost your count and redo. A double slash sounds like erasing. Then a small kick to the chair in front of you to alert or stop the exchange. This is barely noticeable yet easily heard, as tapping your foot is quite normal. You'll only look nervous. Plus, you can mix the toe and heel taps like a beat. A kick makes the chair squeak on the floor and serve as a distraction too. An exchange would go like this. Heel, heel, toe, heel, heel, toe, heel, heel, toe, slash, toe, 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 tells the question number is 33 with the answer D, separated with a single slash. Anticlimactically, we were caught by our teacher during a mock test, and the first dry run of this code, only because 2 guys were caught and ratted us out. OP was hyping up how hard it was to be caught and whatever. Bro, you got caught on a mock test. Not even you, someone else, but still, clearly it wasn't as good as you think. I feel like that would get pretty suspicious pretty fast. Once again, personally, for my tests, if someone were tapping their foot too much just out of nerves, the teacher would still tell them to stop. Teachers are not that dumb, guys. Story 24. When I was in grad school, I went to a prestigious and large university where a lot of people tried to cheat, and the cheating countermeasures they took were often so elaborate. People tried to tape helpful guides to the back of toilets or crumple them up and throw them into a trash can so they could go to the bathroom and get them during the exam. As a result, the bathrooms were inspected and trash emptied at the start of every exam, and students were accompanied to the bathroom. Hats weren't allowed because students would try writing things on the underside of the brim. You had to watch out for students who had written things on their bodies because they might be shifting in odd ways during the exams to get a look at them. There were special buildings that were only used for exams, and additional people were there to help proctor. Professors had to submit exams to the school a month in advance, and the school was responsible for securely photocopying and distributing them at the exam. My field, English, wasn't one where cheating was a particularly big problem, but we still had to take all of the same precautions of more high-stakes fields. Chemistry is a big one, because it is often a stumbling block for people trying to get into med school. Story 25. Teacher told me a story from US history when he used to let students listen to music. They were being tested on the US presidents. One kid was listening to music when his audio cord came out of his phone and his phone started blaring a sound clip of the student listing all the presidents in order. Yeah, music was no longer allowed, but he got to try it again without music because of his creativity. Story 26. My high school trig professor administered all tests via programs he wrote for our in-class TI-83 calculators. Basically, it was just a simple set of questions and answers that automatically graded you after each question. I quickly realized I could just close the program and inspect the code using the edit function, extract the answers and give myself a high B or low A, never 100%. That's a surefire way to get caught. He soon realized students were doing this and obfuscated his code to make it much harder to find the answer by simple inspection. It took a little more work, but I was still able to find the answers, and he quickly began to suspect again that students were cheating. Later, he found a way to force the code to self-delete after it was run for the first time. He would start the test for each calculator before passing them out, so if you tried to access the edit, it would delete itself if you tried to run the program again. I ended up bringing a set of dead batteries of the same brand that he used, accessing the edit, and replacing the batteries with the dead ones and telling him the calculator died halfway through the test. I think I learned more about software than trig that year. Story 27. It was a no notes, no textbook final exam in stats. A kid brought in a water bottle with some formulas printed on the nutritional information section of the bottle. How did they find out? Well, a girl sitting next to him noticed he kept glancing at his water bottle and told the teacher after the test. I'm pretty sure he failed the class. Story 28. Back in high school, I would corrupt an empty Word document so it couldn't be opened, rename it a legit title, and send it to my teacher at the last possible minute the night it was due. I'd show up to class the next day and the teachers would be going over the assignment and sometimes using examples of students who had already submitted theirs way earlier. I would note everything down and then do my actual assignment until my teacher would realize a few days later that they had trouble opening my fake assignment and ask me if I could send it again. Sure, no problem. Story 29. In high school, I had a Dixon number 2, yellow pencil, with all the formulas for geometry carefully inscribed on it. I'd done it in such a way that the writing was an indent, so you had to hold the pencil just so to see the writing. In college, I had calculator apps for chemistry, periodic table, chemical naming / formula, etc., and often had notes in the calculator. In one class, the teacher handed out the key to the test as you were leaving, and didn't confiscate phones. About half the class, not me, got texted the answers and blew the crap out of the curve. The next test was significantly harder. Hardest I'd ever studied for a C. Usually A's were easy. Bastards. Story 30. Not a teacher, but in high school, me and a group of friends used to wait for one of the smart kids to go up and turn their quiz in. As soon as they did, I would go up and distract the teacher asking questions. Another kid would then go up to the tray pretending to turn theirs in, and just take the smart kid's quiz, which was on top, and bring it back to his seat. That quiz would then be passed around to a few people and would get turned back in when we were all done. We did this every quiz. Pretty risky, but obviously the teacher wasn't paying too much attention and we never got caught. Story 31. Not teacher, but a college student here. I once had a prof who counted 80% of the total class grade on 2 4-page long essay assignments. The last 20% was the midterm and final exam. Anyway, I got to class one day close to the end of the semester. I was all ready to review for the final exam when, instead, all my peers pulled out their essays. I instantly panic, remembering my prof stating she doesn't take late assignments and I don't have an essay. I stand up and just walk straight out of the class. I go into the library and print off the past essay I already turned in. I put it under my shirt and walk back into class. I turn in the past essay to the prof with everyone else. Then when I get home, I spend 4 hours typing and email a new essay to the prof stating, sorry, I accidentally turned in my midterm essay instead of my final essay today. Please see attached. She accepted the paper. This is still the greatest accomplishment of my life. Story 32. So my dad once helped a friend of his, let's call him Sam, cheat during an exam. Now Sam was miserably failing chemistry in his last years, but he was lucky. They were doing 2 different exams back to back the same day, and to ensure no one was sneaking a peek at their neighbor's paper, they had 1 row do French and 1 row do chemistry. If you finished your first exam, you went to the teacher, handed in your exam, and got the other. Now Sam asked the teacher if he could hand out the exams, to which the teacher said yes. Now it's important to note that it was June and very hot, so the windows were open. So as Sam approached the end of the first row, which had the chemistry exam, he threw an exam out the window and onto the street, where my helpful dad just happened to wait with Sam's chemistry notes. Dad picks it up, answers all the questions on a blank piece of paper. Now when Sam was done with his French exam, he asked the teacher if he could go to the bathroom. Seeing as he handed in his French but hadn't gotten his chemistry exam yet, the teacher obliged and let him leave. Now my dad was waiting at the toilets to hand him the piece of paper with the answers on it, and all was good. He just wrote the answers on his cheat paper on his actual exam papers and handed it in. Never got caught. I'm just imagining though if Sam was like, "Can I hand out the exams?" And the teacher was like, "No, I'll do it today." Their whole plan is bust, and OP's dad is just waiting out there alone. No paper coming his way, nothing to do. Story 33. In 10th or 11th grade U.S. history, we had a quiz each Friday, where we had to state the president of the week, starting with Washington and moving forward, and name his party, years in office, former occupation, VP and cabinet members, etc. Rather than study for this very easy quiz, I would write the answers in my notebook hard enough that it indented the next page. Then just trace the indentations for the quiz. Pretty much the whole class started doing this eventually. One day, the teacher told us to turn our papers over and flip them upside down. We all failed. Story 34. Not a teacher, but this was kind of creative. In one of my classes, I used to get my work done so fast I was bored for half the period. Eventually, I decided that I knew the material and, probably not a smart idea, decided to try an experiment. I gradually started writing more and more in cursive in the class until my teacher got used to it. Then I would throw in errors to see if they would catch it, and they didn't. This confirmed my suspicions that they couldn't read cursive and just gave me credit anyway. So for the rest of the year, I would literally just scribble in my homework, and the teacher believed it was just my handwriting and gave me credit. Story 35. Not a teacher, but the most clever one I saw was where the student got the instructor to help them cheat. I took an art since 1945 course in college. The way the instructor did tests was to show unmarked slides of different art pieces, and we would have to write down the name of the artist, the name of the piece, and maybe the date. Once he had gone through all the slides, you could request that he re-show any slide you were unsure about. One student, instead of asking, "Could you show slide number 10 again?" instead asked, "Could you show the Pollock again?" And the instructor did it without thinking. No one noticed for a few seconds, and then someone snickered, and the instructor realized he made a mistake. So taking it in stride, he then announced that, "If you had just been paying attention, I told you one of the answers." Story 36. Not a how we got away with it, but instead a how we got caught. High school math. First period, 3 of us carpooled to school and had a test right off. The catch? There was a homework portion and none of us had done it, so we colluded to show up late right before the class ended. Say we had a flat tire, including 2 of us rubbing our hands on the tire and getting them dirty as proof, and ask if we could take the test after school. Teacher agreed, we did the homework during lunch, and showed up to take the test after the last bell. She sat us in opposite corners of the class, handed out the quiz face down, said, "Don't turn it over until I say." We flipped the test on command and, question 1. Which tire? Story 37. I taught kindergarten, I teach another grade now, and between 5 to 6 is a really interesting age. There's a cognitive development that occurs between 5 and 7 where children become much more aware of the perspective of others, and therefore learn how to deceive their peers. I could always tell when a student was a little ahead of the curve when they would cheat during games or activities. I caught one student during a math game deal out all the low number cards to his peers while he kept all the high numbers. He kept winning every single round. I walked around the classroom and stopped to watch these 2 students. The student who was dealt the low cards had no awareness he'd been dealt a crappy hand, and was just happily playing, while the other student won every round and was cheering. I had to stop the game to scold the student who was cheating, but in the back of my head, I was just impressed that he was smart enough to cheat. Yeah, Mom, that's why I cheated at card games as a kid. I was just a smart kid. What can I say? Thank you, Reddit, for validating me. And I'm so sorry to my mother for cheating in all those games when I was younger. Story 38. I posted this before on a similar post, but it was like 2 years ago, so screw it. Also obligatory, not me, but my 7th and 8th grade science teacher told us about how 3 or 4 years before we came, she would teach her students Morse code. Anyway, these 2 guys figured they could share answers to each other by blinking. It took a few months, but she eventually caught on, made both of them wear sunglasses every time there was a quiz, and told the other teachers who also made them wear sunglasses. She never taught Morse code again. Story 39. When I was in middle and high school, a lot of teachers didn't care about making the tests hard. I had a few who would release a review the day before the test, and it was literally just the test. I would take 2, turn in 1, and use the other as a cheat sheet. My mom also bought a bunch, like 30, cheap translucent binders. You can't see the paper inside, but if you press down on it, you can see it crystal clear. So if the teacher catches wise, just lift your foot and cheat sheet gone. My friend caught on and asked for one of my stack. They were hard to find, and eventually the rest of the class caught on. Sold them for $10 each and made $150. Mom wondered why I ran out so fast. Story 40. We had a professor at my college who never changed his test problems, just slightly offset the numbers. This was calculus 2 plus 3, so knowing how to set up the problem was most of the work, and the professor was a super harsh grader. There was an inheritance network for old tests. A person the semester before you would gift you their old tests. Then you'd gift your old tests and theirs to a student the semester after you. By the end of the year, most people had 3 to 4 different versions of each. Story 41. Me and a few of my friends actually learned Tengwar and wrote our cheats in that. None of the teachers could read it, and we could hide behind the fact that we're just a bunch of Lord of the Rings nerds writing all kind of Elvish texts on our stuff. We even had long sleeve shirts and other kinds of clothing covered in Elvish-looking texts, which were basically giant cheat sheets, disguised as teenage drive to be unique. Edit. It wouldn't surprise me if the modern version of this is the Daedric alphabet from the Elder Scrolls or Dothraki. I know another very good friend of mine back then went Klingon. I probably said that language wrong. I guess this is where it gets exposed. I haven't seen or read Lord of the Rings. I can only beg for your forgiveness. Story 42. I'm not a teacher, but I guess I am a semi-creative cheater when it comes to classes I don't give a crap about. I think my best cheat was back when I was an undergrad. I had to take history with the strictest grading professor I'd ever had. Our final was an essay where we had to answer, what was the underlying cause of the Civil War? The answer, by the way, slavery. He gave us the question on the first day of class, so I had a lot of preparation. I spent a month writing the best essay that I could on my computer. The week before, I dumbed it down a bit, considering the essay was no notes and all memory. If I'd left it the way it was, I'm sure he would have known something was up because this essay would have been perfect. The night before, I spent 6 hours imprinting my essay into the blue book. I did this by putting a piece of paper over the blue book page and writing as hard as I could, leaving only the indentation of the words. If you flipped through the book, it looked blank, brand new. But if you looked at it from a certain angle, you could read my whole essay word for word. Final exam day came, and all I had to do was write over the imprinted words. It took up the whole 2 hours we had, and I ended up getting 395 out of 400 on it. Story 43. Wrote all the formulas or even derivations that were important on the back of my calculator with a pencil in such a way that you could only look at it from a particular angle. So if a teacher does look at the calculator, it looks like scratches. But if you tilt the calculator just right, it has everything on it. Did this for all 4 years of engineering. Pro tip. Write all the formulas at the back of the answer sheet as soon as you get them when the teacher is busy. Then just rub off the evidence. Story 44. Not a teacher, but there was a good bit of cheating at my fancy college prep high school. Stuff was hard, man. One class, me and a bunch of the football guys, plus a couple of cool smart kids, would literally pass around a note card during tests, and you would fill in the answers you knew. Teacher was old and super oblivious, so never caught on at all. Mostly, though, me and the other girls would write answers/notes on our thighs before leaving for school. We wore dark tights, so you couldn't see the writing at all unless you pulled the fabric. Once had a teacher accidentally staple the answer key to the back of an exam. Halfway through, a kid told him. I have never seen a whole class so mad at one guy. Had a huge pain of a test once. It was basically just a giant in-class essay, which would be fine, except it was biology. She gave us the prompt beforehand to study, so I wrote out my entire essay before the test and memorized it word for word, like 5 pages. Got an A. There was also a lot of writing on water bottle labels, writing on the cover of calculators, etc., but most of those were caught and outlawed pretty quickly. Story 45. I can see that you guys are new to cheating. In my school year, the most common way to cheat was to write every formula on A4 paper, then get it scanned and reprinted in a much, much smaller size. Now, that's not very creative. The clever one decided that instead of white paper, which can be easily spotted, they do the same thing but with see-through paper instead. But I'm lazy. I know the teachers will always go to the same photocopy place to print all the test papers, so I just go there, pretend that Mr./Mrs. Teacher asked me to collect their paper. When I get the paper from the photocopier, I have a quick glance and tell them it's not the one I'm looking for, and maybe somebody else has already collected the paper. We also ask other classes for their exam papers, since the exam will very likely be recycled anyway. But that's a high-risk choice, since sometimes we have to be the first to take it. Story 46. This was something I did. I was in credit recovery for AP Physics because I failed, and it was all computer-based. So we sat in a lab and just worked on questions through a program. The questions were insanely hard and I was too lazy to learn it, so I devoted my first 3 weeks to figuring out how to cheat. Here's how I did it. When you got a question wrong, it would bring you to another page saying you got it wrong and then give you a new question. I noticed on that wrong answer page you could find the correct answer in the Inspect Elements sidebar if you went digging, but you couldn't go back and try the same question. I would unplug the Ethernet cable to the PC, plug the wrong answer, and since it wasn't loading a new web page, only showing an extension of the original page, it would bring up the wrong answer page. Open Inspect Element, write down the correct answer, and then click for the next question. It wouldn't load because it was a fresh web page. So then I would plug the Ethernet back in and it would reload the original question. Rinse and repeat for 6 weeks. Story 47. Not cheating per se, but I was a substitute teacher a year or so ago. The instructions left for me stated that no one is allowed to have their cell phones to listen to music. So when third period rolled around, I told the class what they were doing for the day, and to let them know I had instructions not to let them have their phones to listen to music. One student raises their hand, and I answer and ask, "What's up?" He just kind of smiles and asked, "What if we have a Walkman?" I looked at him and was like, "What?" He literally had an old 90s portable Walkman cassette player. I just answered, "Well, the instructions say cell phone, so touche, dude." I was known to be pretty chill as a sub. Story 48. It's not creative and it's not anything I've tried before, but it has to be the simplest way in the world. I'm sure everyone has at least thought of doing this before. Wear a long jumper. Put your phone in your pocket. Hide the phone outline with your long jumper. Don't hand in your phone when they ask you to. Claim you're an idiot if they catch you, but still make sure it's on silent and they won't notice. Remember the questions you can't answer. May I go to the bathroom? Teacher follows you, but obviously not in it with you. Google the answers while alone. Remember them. Go back to the test. Take off your clothes and scream at the top of your lungs, "The system creates failures and doesn't care if you succeed or not." Eat your exam, and congrats. You know, OP, I don't know if I'm quite seeing the vision here. I'm just not sure where you lose me. Is it the ripping off your clothes or eating the exam? Story 49. Someone at my college was taking a psychology exam and he convinced the professors to let him listen to music while taking it. It was the same music he had listened to while studying, and the psych material we were being tested on was partially about how sensory input like music can help you recall past experiences like studying. Impressed with his practical application of the study material, the professors agreed. They checked his portable CD player and verified his CD was store-bought and everything seemed fine. Once the test started, he switched his CD player to the radio, and a friend started broadcasting the test answers from the parking lot using a short-range radio transmitter. He probably would have gotten away with it if another professor hadn't been driving to work at the same time, and he came across an unfamiliar radio frequency broadcasting, "Question 1, A. Question 2, C." Story 50. I once took the label on a small water bottle, scanned it, and photoshopped the text on the label into answers for a history test. It was a long block of text, so I had to rotate the text around to match the barcode and everything. Then I printed the new label on a piece of paper, and I carefully used glue to put it on a new bottle after a few botched attempts. This was early 2000s, I believe. Photoshop wasn't known outside of IT people, and I had access to a scanner and printer at my architect stepfather's office, which wasn't as common as it is now, especially in my country. I didn't use it directly. I gave it to a girl I wanted to impress, and she passed the test easily. I think my younger brother used the same method a few years later as well. OP, you left out the most important part. Did you get the girl? I gotta know, man. Story 51. My high school history teacher gave his first test, 50 multiple choice questions, collected it, and then handed the tests back to us the next day for us to grade as he called out the answers. I changed 2 of my answers. Later that day he came by afternoon class and presented me with a photocopy of my original answer sheet and my changed graded sheet, and asked me to explain the discrepancies. Busted. I admitted to changing it because I felt those 2 questions were ones that the real answer was my second choice, and so I gave myself a break. Luckily, I hadn't tried to change all my answers to correct, had a long talk about honesty, and I got off with a warning and my actual grade. Never tried to cheat in his class again. Story 52. Some guy I knew had his law finals and they were an open book test. I think they were statutes or something. I'm not a lawyer. So he printed out a bunch of precedents in the same format, font, and size as the book he was allowed to take, on the same size paper. He then managed to get a local printer/binder to insert the new pages into his copy of the book, and he got away with it too. Story 53. In college, Asian humanities. I was having a really impossible time remembering Asian names/dynasties and their years. I had an exam I had to get an A on to pass the class. I had to take the exam in the testing center, cameras and monitors at every desk to catch cheating, and I happened to get a copy of the exam from a friend that had completed it. Just memorizing wasn't working because it was a lot of Asian names and places that I could just not for the life of me remember, and even though it was multiple choice, it was a 50-question test. So on the way to the test, I had an idea. I stopped at Walmart and bought a box of little colored beads and a thing of string. I sat in the parking lot and made a cheating bracelet. A equals aqua, B equals blue, C equals copper, and D equals dark purple. And I put a clear decorative bead at the beginning and end to show where they start. It was actually a pretty bracelet. I finished it there in the parking lot in less than 3 minutes. I put it on my wrist and wrote the test. Each side of my wrist showed about a third of the answers, so I only had to move a little or pretend to fiddle with it once or twice over an hour to see the rest. It was amazing. I purposefully missed a couple of hard ones to throw off the scent. No one ever knew, and I magically passed the class. Story 54. My dentist is a college professor as well. He told me that in one of the years he was teaching a class about working with wires, the bracer kind, the whole class just showed up with absolutely perfect work. He found it strange but couldn't say anything. At graduation, the students confessed that they took the wires and the shapes they needed to make to a jewelry crafting hippie on the beach. They gave him $20 and he just did everyone's work for them. Okay, well that's horrifying for anyone who has to get bracers from those students. Just a thought, maybe that's something you should learn actually. Story 55. I'm not a teacher. However, during my 8th grade year, I dated this guy whose mother taught in our 7th grade English department. We have an online school board with all of our classes called Canvas. You can put assignments, messages, notes, tests, and pretty much anything else school-related on there. Since there was a test function, most teachers used this, so they didn't have to print out a million copies and hand grade each and every one of them. My boyfriend's mom, I'll call her Miss N, had a vocab quiz planned for her advanced placement students on Canvas. The advantage with Canvas is it doesn't put your computer on lock, so you can still look at other tabs and such. They did the test and scores came out unusually high. The downside to cheating with Canvas is you always get caught, because teachers have the advantage of when grading, they can see whether you left the tab, when you did, and how many times. In the end, she ended up finding out around 80% of her students had cheated. I remember hearing about it on the bus that day, and while I was planning on heading over to their house to chill with my boyfriend for a bit, I ended up comforting her while she broke down to me about not knowing what to do, and how she feels like a horrible teacher because her students don't know the material. It honestly was so saddening because she is the sweetest, most amazing teacher ever. Really a true blessing to our school. Pretty much the entirety of the 8th grade class at the time was super mad at just about everybody in the 7th grade class for doing this to such an amazing teacher. It really was something. Like, if I gave a group of 7th graders a test, and I let them tab out without telling them that I would know at the end, yeah, I would expect 80% of them to cheat. Hell, I would expect more of them to cheat. It sucks for the teacher, but kids are kids. I'm not saying they should, but just that they will. It's an inevitability. Story 56. Not technically cheating, I guess, but certainly creative. Students were allowed one sheet of paper for notes on the final exam. If whatever they wrote or typed fit on the front of one sheet of paper, then it was allowed. There was one rule. They couldn't use a magnifying glass to read small print notes. One student printed an entire sheet of notes in red ink, then printed an entire sheet of notes on the same page in blue ink over top of it, then wore a pair of red, blue 3D glasses to class that day. Of course, it was allowed because it didn't break the only rule. However, a new rule was established because of that student. I respect the hustle on this one. I don't even really fully understand how this works, but just the idea of someone wearing 3D glasses while writing a test, very funny to me. Story 57. On my organic chemistry final, I came to the very last page of the test and had no idea how to answer the last two questions. So I did what anyone would do. I ripped it off, turned it in. A week later, I got an email from the teacher that something must have happened when he was assembling the test and I had not received the last page. He extrapolated my score from 85 points to 100 and I passed easily. Story 58. I'm a student and I've learned a lot of ways of how to cheat. But I think the most creative one that I've done was cheating through hand/sound signal. My ex and I used to study together for a particular subject. So what we did was we usually split the topic into two, one part for him and the latter for me, because we had a professor who uses PowerPoint for the questions and usually has multiple choice. Then during the examination day, the strategy is, I'll do the hand signal and he will do the sound, so I always sit in front of him. Hand signals are A, index finger, B, middle finger, C, ring finger, D, pinky. So basically I would lift a finger equal to the letters, just pretending to scratch my head or temple or touching my face. The sound signals are A is one sound, B is two sounds, C is three sounds, and D is four. For example, clicking a pen twice means the answer is B. If he coughs 3 times, the answer is C. We came to this because it was impossible to cheat on the subject because the professor was very strict, and gives you an automatic grade if he catches you cheating. And we were also desperate because the prof is known for failing half of his class. Until now, I can still remember the adrenaline rush I felt during those examination days. I felt like someone was twisting my gut because I was too nervous to get caught, but at the same time, I was having fun. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Story 59. Someone came to the test room early and had taped a sheet of notes underneath the desk. I thought it was odd that he was there so early. He wanted to make sure he sat in that seat. He hid a small mirror in his lap so he could read the notes underneath the desk. However, in the age of smartphones, anyone who continuously looks down at their lap is always on the proctor's radar. I saw the reflection of the lights above him on his face, found the mirror, and he got a 0. Story 60. This is the exact opposite. I knew a guy in college that got the questions/answers to a physics test somehow. Never would say, but I'm 99% sure he was screwing the grad assistant. He wasn't an idiot, but was psyched to have the test. Offered it to me and one other guy. I was doing fine in the class and understood the material, so I passed. Anyway, he got so worried about getting caught if he did too well and or the test being changed, he quite literally spent a week and a half studying every day, not only memorizing the questions and answers, but also, hey, learning the material. It was bizarre. The test was the same, but he purposefully got a B to avoid it being obvious. He knew the stuff so well that had the test been totally different, he would have easily gotten an A. He knew the material as well as I did, and I got mid-90s. The human mind is so damn bizarre. TLDR, dude got the test key but purposefully sandbagged his grade to be worse than if he had just taken it without cheating. Story 61. Had a fellow student in one of my science classes bring a vitamin water bottle into class. They designed a new label for the bottle with answers written into it and then brought it. And less creative, but I went to a Catholic high school, and on test days, the girls would wear kilts and write the answers on their upper thighs. The teachers would never ask them to lift their kilts to look for hidden writing. Story 62. I'm not a teacher, but I'll share how I cheated to get 100% on an exam. The professor thought he had a real clever offer to make the class. If you could go through the exam and get 100% wrong, he would give you 100% right. However, if you only got one right answer, then your score would reflect the one correct answer. Sounds pretty risky, right? Well, I got 100% wrong by not answering a single question. This exam was on a Scantron sheet, and he never made the stipulation that you had to answer the questions. I shared this with a couple of classmates who were blown away, so they tried it on the final. But the professor caught it this time, and they both failed the final and got D's in the class. Story 63. While I am a teacher, this is in regard to when I was a student in high school. I think it was back in 2002 or 2003. My buddy and I were allowed to use our TI-83 calculators in biology. I don't recall why. You can connect to these calculators to transfer data and programs between them, yet the cable is very short. So my friend cut the cable and extended it using a landline phone cord. He sat in front of me in class and made it just long enough to reach. We covered the cable using our backpacks to hopefully not get caught. I wrote a chat program that functioned similar to any basic instant messenger. During test time, we would chat back and forth using our calculators. Story 64. Not a teacher, but both of my parents are. In high school in the 90s, we had to write a big research paper, but the main point of the project was to use sources from the internet. We could use one or two from other sources, but had to have a crap ton from this internet thing. Thing was, I went to a backwoods school and was one of the few people in school, including the teachers, that ever went online. I found all the content I needed in some book from the library and had a hell of a time finding all the internet sources I need. So I did what anyone would do. I made an Angel Fire page with a name close to my report topic and put a big under construction banner on it. Then did the same thing with GeoCities. I cited the crap out of both of them and got an A. Story 65. Rubber Band Man. In my high school Latin class, an oversized football player, aka Man, seemed to always ace the vocabulary tests. But he had a foolproof mental recall system, or so we thought. In fact, every class we had together, I noticed his ability to answer A to B type inquiries was nothing short of phenomenal. Even his mathematical formulas were always spot on. His actual calculations, well, not so much. Tutoring the man for a Latin final exam, he had no intentions or need on studying any of the vocabulary words, definitions, tenses, etc. He only had concern for descriptive, conjugative, structure, and exploratory type questions. He only had concern for descriptive, conjugative, structure, and exploratory type test questions. I said to him, I'm just wondering, how can you flawlessly recite and recall vocabulary and formulas on point like you do, but can't remember for the life of you how to put it all together? He said to me, "Rubber band, man." I said, what? Then he proceeded to take the rubber band off his wrist. He stretched it out and placed it around a notebook long ways. As the rubber band stretched out, you can see all of the answers to each vocab word. It included gender variations, prefixes, suffixes, tenses, etc. Then when he took the rubber band off the notebook, it retracted to its original size and all the answers disappeared. I had no idea how much information a simple rubber band could actually hold. I just know this man was sweating every test, hoping, please don't break, please don't break. Story 66. I remember the first year of uni, there was a quiz exam they made us take on computers because reasons. And we were allowed to use calculators, including the Windows calculator. Also, each question had its own page in the browser, and the number of questions was its ID in the database, not the sequential number of the question. Well, what do you know? someone got a hold of the answer matrix and made a clone of the Windows calculator. It looked exactly the same, but if you input the ID of the question, it output the letter corresponding to the correct answer. The program was distributed on a floppy drive, good times, and almost everyone had it. They randomized the letters of the answers after that. Story 67. Not a teacher, but I had a very smart friend who had his own method of sharing multiple choice questions to the whole class, or at least whoever knew the code. Basically, at our school, we would have 3 parts on our tests. First being multiple choice, and the last being a text. Either some short story for languages or some explanation of a process for chemistry/biology classes and such. So what we did is we learned how to convert numbers to binary, and when that guy had the answers, he was a straight A+ kind of guy, he would ask the teacher, "Hey, is 583 words long enough for the last question?" We would hear the number, convert to binary, and that would be the multiple choice answers. Basically, each pair of bits would be an answer. 00, A, 01, B, and so on. If there was true or false questions, he would ask the same question twice. But we would know the smaller number would be for those instead. Never got caught. Story 68. I'm not a teacher, but I just learned of one the other day that I thought was pretty clever. A student managed to sneak through an entire nursing program with this device and was finally caught during the final. The student would wear glasses that had a tiny camera hidden in the frame and a Bluetooth earpiece that was disguised as hearing aids. The person would look at the test and whoever was watching, wherever the camera was streaming to, would talk into a microphone and give the student the correct answer. Story 69. Story 69. I used to do an ongoing math challenge with my students called century words. A equals 1, B equals 2, etc. They have to find a word that equals exactly 100 points. Wizards or elephants, for example. I'd give them clues to help them, such as a city in Canada. Anyway, this one kid goes home and writes some kind of script that read and evaluated all the words in a dictionary and prints off the list of all the words that equaled 100 points. Did I mention he's in grade 3? Story 70. Here's something that I always did that we thought was pretty clever in high school. Whenever I had an essay that I didn't get around to doing in time, I would just write gibberish on a Word doc, then save it and open it with a notepad. Notepad transcribes it into some sort of source code, but all you have to do is delete a single character from the document and save it. Then when you try to open it as a Word doc, it won't open, and will give an error. If you turn this in as your essay, it's bound to take your teacher at least a few days to notice, at which point they would ask you to resubmit it, giving you extra time to finish whatever you were supposed to write. OP, I promise you, man, you can also just ask for an extension. A lot of teachers, especially in high school, are very forgiving for that. But hey, if your teachers weren't, then sure, corrupt a document and send it in. Story 71. Not a teacher. In uni, I had an early morning's religion class, and I hated it. The professor treated us like high school kids. Couldn't even go to the washroom during the lecture. Imagine listening to the Jeebus propaganda at 8 a.m. Came the final, I knew I was going to fail from lack of interest and studying. I spoofed the professor's email and emailed the whole class the night before the final that it was cancelled due to illness. I decided to show up to the final anyway, and there were around 5 students who showed up because they didn't get the email due to spam filter. I played along that I didn't get the email either. The professor stormed into the classroom and explained that the final is postponed a week because of the prank, and threatened to expel whoever did it. He said he handed it over to University IT to investigate. I was laughing inside. Good luck tracing 3 proxies across 2 continents. I passed with a C thanks to the extra week. Story 72. My class had a Java programming test which had to be done using only Notepad and command prompt. Question was a complicated algorithm which had multiple possible solutions. Friend of mine wrote some bullcrap algorithm which no sane person could understand and saved it as 0.java. He then wrote a simple print statement to print the expected outcome in O.java. Teacher came to his seat, looked at his algorithm, and understood nothing. She asked him to compile and run his code. Dude compiled 0.java and executed O.java. He got top marks, minus a couple of points for bad coding standards for naming his file improperly. Story 73. I had a project to do that made up a significant portion of my grade, due towards the end of the semester to be submitted via email. Teacher had a strict, "I do not accept late work. If you're 1 second late, you get a 0. policy. I missed the deadline in getting it put in, but the next week in class I approached the professor demanding an explanation for the 0. They explained to me that I had not submitted the assignment, and I lied that I had and I could prove it. Once class was out, I went to my work computer, I worked on campus, and pulled out the network cable. Once it was out, I changed the system clock to alter the date on the system. First, I opened the project to make sure that the last time it was shown as being edited was the date before it was due, Then I opened up Outlook and composed the email to submit the project and hit send. It went to my outbox with the spoofed date and time on it. Then I took screenshots, including the email and date sent recorded on the email. I then deleted the email to make sure it never actually sent the professor the screenshots along with the project, and explained that I must have been the victim of some kind of technical error. He accepted the assignment. I gotta admit, when I was in high school, I also thought of, predating my stuff like this. What I never thought of was predating a sent email in a screenshot. That is a clever way of cheating, OP. That being said, you did miss a deadline that you knew about for the whole semester, so do you deserve to cheat and get away with it here? Well, that's not up to me to decide. But is this clever? Yeah, is pretty good, OP. Anyway, that is all the stories we have for today. Remember, everyone, if you're still in school, taking tests and whatever, and you listen to this, use these powers for good. But for now, I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.